Now broadcasting the Dr. Nilda Business Foresight Show, positioning your business with strategies for an extraordinary future. Dr. Nilda features expert guests from diverse backgrounds to bring you their stories and strategies that have helped them reach their success. The diversity in industries gives you that panoramic view from an array of industries. They are innovators, thought leaders, trendsetters, and strategists. Here, Dr. Nilda reveals strategies that will position you to be on the cutting edge and be able to do what you love with the people you like, making the profits you want to live the lifestyle that you have dreamed of. And now, here's your host, Dr. Nilda Perez.
Back to the Dr. Nilda Business Foresight Show. Today with me is my co-host, Rachel Calderon. Say hello, Rachel.
Hello, how are you guys?
And today I have a guest. Today we have with us Anne Boysen, who was here a few weeks back, and she was talking about Generation Z. Today she's going to be talking about the future of transportation. Anne Boysen uses original methods to draw from strategic foresight and data analysis. She dives deep into social statistics, trend spotting, and data mining to advise businesses and nonprofits on how to act on early signs of change. She shares her insights as an advisor via consulting projects and keynotes around the world. Boysen also works as an alliance partner for the Pearson Strategy Group, and she is the vice president of the central chapter of the World's Future Society. She holds a master's in future studies from the University of Houston and additional graduate level education in business analysis and data mining. Welcome back, Anne. How are you?
Good, and thanks for having me again.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about transportation and the future of transportation. I think this is a very interesting topic, to say the least. And it's definitely something that we all use. I think more than ever, I think everybody uses some form of transportation, if not all, right? So I want you to tell me, what do you see as the future of transportation, let's say 2040, 2050?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the first thing we need to start thinking about is how is the demographic picture changing? Because it's really the demography that is going to dictate the needs for transportation and what we're going to see on the road and at what times. And I think that's an important area to start, because it's very easy to start with the technology and then we forget the market, but we need to kind of start with the market. So one of the ways that one of the behavior patterns that we can anticipate is changes in work commuting. So for example, the demographic shift is such that we're going to have a lot more older people, and we have a smaller ratio between older and younger people. So the millennials are going to approach middle age, and the baby boomers are going to be maybe a decade shy of becoming centenarians. We're going to have a few of them around because people are living longer. So of course, some of them are so we have two big, populations. We have the baby boomers, and we have the Gen Xers, who are pretty small, and then you have millennials at the bottom. So that when the millennials are entering sort of that midlife, that's what we're talking about here. And then we're going to have a lot of, the baby boomers who are maybe not so much on the road to go to work anymore, because you typically are not doing that when you're in the 80s and your 90s, even as we're, continuing to live longer and longer. Now, another thing that is important to remember is that millennials have come to a much more delayed, a lot of millennials are coming to a delayed adulthood, which means that even though they are in their close to middle age, they might actually just have started family, not just have started families, but they might have kids, that 10, 15 years old at home. So they might, not be in that same situation as, for example, boomers were at the same age. Another trend we're seeing is that we have more and more freelancers. We might actually have as many as 50% freelancers in 2040. And telecommuters, because we don't really need to travel unless we absolutely have to. So this makes for a much less predictable traffic picture, because people are going to go whenever they need to go, and you can't really predict, the traffic flow as well as you can do today. However, that's not necessarily a very difficult problem to have. It might actually represent some solutions, because we are going to start to use technology where our vehicles, or the different transportation system, at least the vehicles on the road, are going to communicate with one another. So there's going to be algorithms to decide what is the best road to take now, and where should you go here instead, and so forth. And then, of course, and I should probably also mention, we are expecting to see some changes in public transportation, which will allow people to live further away from work and still be able to commute pretty far distances. So the Hyperloop is basically like a magnetic vacuum tube, which is the idea is that you can send people in these little pods very, very fast, almost as fast as commercial jets at the moment.
Wow.
So cities that will, if they will get this type of infrastructure, will be able to put far more distances behind them. Now, why I think this is viable and a viable technology is because what we're seeing now in the urbanization is people are moving into cities, but we're kind of reaching a maximum of how many people are going to be able to finance and be able to live in these very, very big metropolitan areas. So what we might see instead, and what we have started to see, is that with these medium-sized cities, for example, you have Austin versus Houston and Dallas. You have that sort of, that triangle. You have San Francisco, Sacramento, LA. So you have all these, and you have all these little cities in between that are urban, but they're kind of far away. So once we get this type of transportation that can get us there much faster, we might see people live further away from where they work, if they still commute into the city whenever they're not working from home. So we see that. And then, of course, what is on everybody's lips these days, the self-driving car. So if and I'm not saying when we do, but if we see self-driving cars on the road by 2040, and I think there's a pretty high probability that we might, I do believe that the whole commuting experience, the whole culture around travel is going to change dramatically.
Okay.
I feel like I'm living in the Jetsons, which was one of my favorite cartoons back in the early I don't even remember when, but I never thought that it would actually get to this moment of self-driving cars, because I know Ford has the reversible, it drives itself into a parking lot, which kind of, for me, it's a little skeptical. But what are other things, technologies that we're to expect in our cars?
So typically we want to divide the different levels of automation into 5. We typically have 5 levels of automation. Right now, what you can see on the road already with Tesla, you have some level 2 automation, where it means that they can basically do most of the driving itself. Those are the ones that are commercially available. We do also have, like in our neighborhood, we used to have this little Google car driving around, test driving around in the neighborhood. And that was very interesting, because they had to put a person inside there because people would freak out if you didn't have that. But that little car was basically collecting data.
And I've seen that.
Yeah. And so, when we get to level 4 and 5 automation, that is the level where the car can do everything on its own. That's really what we call full automation. That's when you don't have to pay attention at all to the road. And, the driving, the computer takes care of itself. And I think that a lot of people have this idea, with the different levels of automation, you have 0 here, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like it's a linear sort of like we just have to overcome these different hoops and then we're getting to the next level. But it's more like this. So, you get to level 2, then possible to level 3, and then there's a huge distance to get to those last levels of automation, or to be able to put them in the car. And that's not because we don't have the technology, the deep learning networks that are capable, the technology infrastructure to be able to process that information that the car needs. The point is we need so much more data. We need incredible amounts of data. for the car to understand what it needs to do in different situations. So, for example, in a typical situation, start, stop, a person gets into the road, you say bicycle, yes, you can predict for all of those situations. And so it's fairly easy to teach the car to get to that level. And that's, when you get up to that level 2, level 3. Now, the last few levels, the reason that we still might be some ways ahead before we have full automation is because we have to prepare the car for scenarios that we might not even have seen before. And now we're talking about something
exactly.
And this is something called Moravec's paradox. So Moravec lived back in the computer stone age and realized that, and he was working on artificial intelligence, and he realized that computers can do very sophisticated mathematical work. They're far better than us. So 90% of the time, computers are so much better than us because they have these, they're not clouded by all of our strange biases and our shortcuts in our thinking.
Right.
But when it comes to that last 10%, when we actually when things are really unusual, for example, you're in the jungle, there's something moving towards you. It looks like it has like a snout or something and 2 eyes, and it's moving like this. Now, the thing is, like, a computer algorithm will try to sort of like use some sort of Bayesian logic and try to understand, like, go through a lot of algorithms. Oh, okay, this HEX color, number there, and then it's like this pixelated up in the corner. The problem, it's not going to be able to run away fast enough because it doesn't have that instinct to understand this is danger, run away. And that's the type of intelligence that we're still struggling with. And it's not because we don't have the digital, like convolutional neural networks and all that stuff. It's just we don't have enough data. So where do you get that data? So it's going to take a lot of time to get all that data to get to full automation, I think. Right.
And as you're speaking, this is a scenario that's coming to mind. If there is, an unusual hailstorm or an unusual volcano or will that car be running into it? Because a human being will know enough to say, oh my goodness, there's something going on over there. We need to get out of that. But if the car is not prepared for that scenario, the car will very well put you in danger rather than get you to where you need to go, or, which is its function. It's what it's supposed to do, but it won't know those scenarios, and it doesn't have the brain to be able to process this.
Exactly. And it doesn't have the survival instincts. I think we play we don't really put a lot of emphasis on that. Like there's something in us that makes us so the human brain is able to do a lot with very little information. I'm not saying we should. And I would say that in 90% of the cases, we probably should leave a lot of decision-making to the computers because they are better at, deductive analytics. And again, I'm steeped in data mining and data analytics. I've been working with some of these algorithms myself. And it absolutely, it's, the statistical model that I can, let some of my programs use. There's no way I would come up with that in my head. I would never be able to reach that decision. But in a split-second decision, that I still might be
far better, right? It's still like being in control. Right. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Right. Makes perfect sense. Right. Yeah. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Here's my next question. Now that is transportation in terms of your cars, and how does transportation look, planes and even boats? Like, where do you see the future of that going?
I haven't really worked in that domain very much. Okay. I do know that they're experimenting. When you talk about planes and boats, material, the masses of the materials used, big concern. And I know that there's some really, really lightweight materials coming out now where, almost as much as 90% is just air. And it's the construction itself, it's the absorption in the construction itself that makes the material so strong. So, and then you can put, graphene, nanofiber. It's all these different types of metals themselves, and then it's the construction of the materials. So I think we'll see more lightweight. I think we'll see there's many interesting things happening with energy, what type of energy they will be using, but that's really not I'm not so familiar with that particular area. I'm looking more at regular day-to-day transportation.
Right. And I'm thinking more of humans using, will there be more transportation in terms of, will people be using more planes? I know that they're using far more planes now than they were when I was younger and I was a child. I remember that going away was a huge deal. Why? Because most people didn't. And so it was huge. And now that's, being transient is not a problem. You can be here today and in London this afternoon.
Yeah.
And then back in 2 days.
Yeah.
So that's the change. That's more of the change that I'm talking about.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yes. And we see this. I think millennials are the ones that are traveling the most, with Generation Z following very close behind. And that is probably more of an age thing that, they just haven't reached those years yet. Now it slows down a little bit when you're in the age of Generation X, but, because they're, it depends on why you travel too. So I would think that Generation Xers are probably doing a little bit more business travel, and millennials are traveling. And what we're seeing too is the younger people that tend to travel for short amounts of time. They don't plan these long vacations. It's more like, I'm going to take a short trip, and they also want to combine pleasure and business much more than generations before.
Right.
So those are some interesting trends.
Right. So, because in my travels, that's the other thing I've seen. People go, generation, not Z. I think millennials. I see a lot of millennials going away for the weekend to Puerto Rico, going away for the weekend to Austin. Mm-hmm. Oh, we're just going for the weekend. We needed a getaway. So, and it's not something that I was accustomed to. I'm a baby boomer, and it was not something I was accustomed to. So I always have to have a purpose. I'm going on vacation. I'm going to be away for a week, or I'm going, for business. But they just do these very frivolous travel, and I find that to be so interesting. Mm-hmm. And it's just for a few days, or just. So it is because they've become very accustomed and very comfortable with traveling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So,
yes, absolutely. I think, and again, so we sometimes we tend to think of younger generations as just isolating themselves in this technological bubble world where they don't want to get out of it, but they are very physical and they do travel. And I actually think that if I were to speculate freely, I think that we're going to start to see emergence between the physical world of travel and transportation and the social media world. For example, we've already started to see it. If you take, for example, if you go back to regular day-to-day travel, what is ride sharing services like Uber, what it really is a social platform that connects driver and passenger.
Right.
And then we have
I love it.
And then you have navigation apps such as Waze, which is basically there's a lot of, so on top of the GPS, you have social input where people are adding explanation, social explanation. There's something going on. The reason that you have all these traffic here is because there's a traffic accident further up the road. Now, imagine this, because in 10, 15 years, we might have connected vehicles where our cars are actually communicating with each other and the environment around us. Actually, the government has set aside parts of the spectrum, of the radio spectrum, just for that purpose, because it's if you can keep some low latency communication between vehicles, it means that you can improve safety. Now, if you take this one step further, so you have this vehicle-to-vehicle communication and vehicle-to-infrastructure communication, you layer on a social network on top of it. Now you have a completely different transportation experience, because you might be sitting stuck in traffic, and then you realize that whoever opted in to share their social information, oh, that's my friend over there sitting, a few car lengths up the road. Right. Or your neighbor might be somewhere else in the lane, and they might be, putting their car in cruise control and say, hey, I'm going to go by the store, do I need to pick up something for you? Or, you might have eye contact with some very cute person.
That's what I was going to say would be a very good, yes, it'll be the new dating site.
Exactly. It becomes a new dating site. Now it's
new dating site.
Right. Now the commute is fun again, So
right.
again, I don't think we should think of, our world as either digital or physical. I think that we're starting to see the emergence of these two worlds coming together. And that's where the future might be going in terms of both transportation and social interaction.
Or how about in the business world? If we're stuck in traffic, we can still have our meeting via our smart car.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's some of those propositions that are coming out. When we do get self-driving cars, we don't really need to own our car anymore. Some people still want to, but you don't really have to. And then the idea is that your car is no longer just a car; it becomes a moving room. Now, if you are going to be transported in a moving room that you don't own, well, if you're going to have a business meeting, you might have, a car or a moving room that has some, some business functionality to it, where you can have a meeting, you have good Wi-Fi, you have all this facility. Now, let's say you want to do a road trip with a family, you might opt to have a self-driving car that is, very child-friendly. So all of a sudden you have a completely new, a new environment and a completely new way of looking at travel and cars in general. They don't simply won't look like cars anymore.
Right. That's some experience, right? I always tell people that the beauty of the future is that we look at everything that we do, everything that we buy, and everything that we sell to make it an experience.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. And so that's excellent.
Yeah.
So I have one.
Okay. I was going to ask.
Okay. I have one last question. So I want to know what some of the interesting scenarios on the horizon. We're always looking at scenarios. So what are some of the interesting scenarios on the horizon that will change the way that transportation will look in the future?
So I think I really think it depends on whether cities actually do come together, do different stakeholders in different cities and rural areas as well. To the extent that they come together and they can work together, because there's going to be a lot of data sharing that becomes necessary. We're talking about a smart city development, that includes so many stakeholders from different backgrounds, and all of these need to work together. You have the people in business, you have the real estate developers, you have the city municipalities, you have energy sector, you have the car companies, and so much is about exchanging data. And there's a lot of concerns around that. There's a lot of infrastructural concerns around it. It has to do with, there's liability issues. When something goes wrong, who's responsible? There's hackability issues. That might actually be one of the greatest issues, is like when we get this whole smart infrastructure where everything is connected to everything else. Imagine if you hack into that. Now what happens? What kind of security scenarios do we have here? So there's a lot of externalities. There's a lot of, potential political stalemates, which is why when I think in terms of the future and future scenarios in transportation and internet connected world in general, I think we're starting to get into this phase of politics. Like it's political. It's not so much technological anymore. It's like, how do we regulate it, and how do we actually facilitate this development, if that is what we want? And we have to decide, first of all, if that is what we want. But if that's what we want, how do we facilitate it?
Exactly.
So instead of speculating on that scenario versus that, I think that's one of those key issues that need to be hashed out before we get where we think we're going.
Okay. Fantastic.
Yes.
I love this. This has been an excellent interview. Do you want to leave any takeaways with the audience regarding transportation and the future of it?
I don't know. I'm actually very interested to see the next generation and how they interact with their cars. There are some surveys coming out. With millennials, we saw car interest in buying new cars drop of course, now they're buying a lot of cars, and that's only because of the life phase that they're in. They're getting into that establishment phase, you know, starting families, and people realize at some point it's just easier to have a car. And so, you know, you could say, you know, were they not interested in buying cars because they were on to a late start, or was this a trend? What we're starting to see with Generation Z is that they are actually more interested in owning cars. They're not very interested in bells and whistles. They're not interested in big brands. They're interested in safety. So I think that that's kind of interesting. You know, if you're a parent, you might actually be on the same side with your child in terms of priorities. If you're looking into buying a new car, they're very interested in safety. So you can sleep well at night. They're not going to try to road rage or get out late at night. And well, you know, I'm not going to promise anything, but you know, it looks like this generation has a pretty good head on their shoulders. So.
Okay, fantastic.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, I want to thank you for coming to the show and sharing the future of transportation, which I know is something that we're all very interested in because we all need to get somewhere. So
yes.
We all need transportation some way or another. So I want to thank you, Anne, for being here with us. And we look forward to, you know, probably in the very near future, if you come up with, in your data map mining, if you come up with something new, please let us know so that we can have you back on the show. Okay?
I will do that. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, awesome.
Alrighty. Bye-bye.
All right, guys. I want to thank everyone for being here, and we want to thank you for being able to share Anne with you guys and to show you that the future of transportation is fast and furious. And before we know it, there's going to be a lot of changes in the way we travel and what we travel in. So thank you so much for being here. I look forward to seeing you next week with another guest. Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Foresight Strategy Show. You can hear host Dr. Nilda, co-host Rachel with featured guests every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Facebook Live or anytime on demand. Visit www.drnildaperez.com/show. For more information, sign up to our Foresight Strategies Insider newsletter, a $10 value for free at www.drnildaperez.com/newsletter.